I'm going to pass it off to Bumble to dive into our level expansion interview with Pivot.
Yeah, thanks so much. Just a refresher, hello, my name is Bumblebee, and I'm a community manager here at Warner Brothers. And we are joined today by the wonderful McPivot. Could you please introduce yourself again in case anyone's just joining us here, Mr. Pivot?
Absolutely. Hey, I'm McPivot. I'm a designer here on the Game of Thrones Conquest team. I design features, plan out rewards, mentor younger designers, that kind of thing. And you may have heard me here before with my partner in crime, that guy, who's not here to answer all the questions for me, so I can just say that guy nailed it. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, we're actually going to have to hear from you this time.
I know. It's a bummer.
Yeah, but it's great to have you back on the show. And obviously today we're here to talk about a very hot topic. Honestly, this has been a hot topic for years, level expansion. Earlier this week, we released our first developer diary talking about just the unique hurdles that go into a feature like this and all the different factors that we have to keep in mind when developing something like level expansion. And there has been a lot of discussion here on Discord since we posted that announcement. So I wanted to start things off with something that I've seen raised a lot amongst discussions there, which is why do we think level expansion is the right move rather than some other feature, and why are we doing it now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, a lot of the features that we've explored over the years have been, addressing identified problems. So quality of life, bug fixes, that kind of stuff, stake your claim, competition, something near and dear to my heart, seasonal leaderboard, right? And we sort of have this growing problem that's been building for a while now, which is there's a lot of players that are beginning to max their buildings, which leads to them not being able to compete in building events and all that sort of stuff. People might be familiar with this happened with dragons not too long ago, and we introduced dragon gear crafting and dragon care. So the answer to why now is we just feel like it's hit a critical maximum point, and this is sort of the right time we feel to address this problem. So
what you're saying is that opening Pike will not address this specific problem that we're
Sadly, no.
How could you say?
Yeah, we have it a lot. I know. I hate to say it. We've tried a lot of different things, but there is, something core here that we're missing. And it is worth calling out that we've waited a really long time before doing this, partly because we were exploring other options. But the other aspect, which is something that I was really struck by when I started talking to you and the rest of the expansion team, was this commitment that you guys have had to really examining that first one that we did, that expansion from, I believe it was 2019, where we added levels 31 to 35, learning what effects that has had on the game, and trying to understand what we should do this time in order to, maybe mitigate some of the consequences of that first approach. So can you talk us through what you personally took away from analyzing that first expansion and why it was so important to understand that before even thinking about starting expansion 2?
Yeah, I think one of the important things that we sort of uncovered was, while we had designed the progression to have this sort of surge of momentum out the gate for folks, it sort of was one of those like good intentions with unintended consequence sort of moments. And that we didn't really expect or plan for. I think another thing we sort of saw was, to watch players' balances for resources sort of grow and evolve over time. Like what did they have excess of that they didn't have any use for? What was in high demand? Those were like interesting discoveries, but all that, like, it was important to understand because, it's just interesting to see how all that impacted the delivery or the feeling that players got with that progression, right? So for some folks, they were feeling it felt sort of discouraging, and so uncovering the nugget of where that comes from was really important to us when approaching this second expansion.
Yeah, I come back to that idea. Specifically in the blog, I believe there was a point that's been discussed a lot. I've seen amongst players. Was that idea that with the first expansion, we made level 31 require 55%, I think it was, fewer resources overall compared to the previous level. And that was a decision that we specifically made because we, given the nature of progression, costs increase every time. And by the time you start adding levels at the end here, they're just really high, and that kind of scared us. Like we didn't want people to look at that and feel like it was impossible to progress, so we made a decision not to do that. And we broke what was a predictable, natural pattern that the rest of the game had been built around in terms of progression. But I know we've seen a lot of what that choice has done in the years since. So from your perspective, as an economic designer on our game, how did that impact how you would go around designing rewards and other gameplay elements around that decision?
Yeah, so I think particularly with rewards, right? Like you never want the rewards to go down as a player levels up or when you introduce something new, right? Like that just is a feel bad sort of experience all around. And so one of the consequences of this change in the velocity of the player's progression was that we sort of split the player base around keep level 30. And not in a way that we intended. So we sort of have this moment where players who are coming up to 30 have higher needs than players past 30, right? And so when you're designing rewards, you're trying to choose who's your target audience, right? Like one thing might feel stingy for one group when it's satisfying for the other. Another might be that it's satisfying for them, but then excessive for the other, which then leads to other reward design or reward sources to feel kind of worse. And on top of that, right, like as players go through the progression, as they don't need those building resources anymore, that just is like further limiting your reward diversity, which sort of has like a reverberating effect on the game in general, right? So
yeah, and I think that also comes back to another line that we had in the blog. It was one that came from talking to you and the team that really stuck with me, was this idea that progression should be aspirational because that's the fun of kind of going on this journey. And I think you can see that trickle down into a lot of the other decisions that have gone into our approach for this next one. So jumping off that, why did we decide that it is better overall to follow the predictable pattern that we had established in terms of growth for the next 5 levels, despite that, what you might call like a sticker shock?
Yeah, well, I think going back to that quote, right? Like that idea of aspirational progression should be driven by the player sort of forming their own personal goals and achievements, right? And I think one of the issues we saw was we slightly shifted the feeling of that progression from being, this sort of goal-oriented thing to a sort of expected milestone for players, which didn't feel great. So we're going to go in a different direction, and I think that's going to lead to this sort of feeling of sticker shock, right? And there always is going to be that, especially like as someone, I don't know if I have a lot of massive multiplayer online fans out there, but as a player and former dev of those, right? Whenever a new expansion comes out, the new numbers are daunting and it makes you uneasy. But when we looked at it, we ultimately decided that if we continue the growth curve, that just opens the door for us to have a different approach, so we can be more aggressive with, let's say, cost reduction for rewards and events, or we can create more compelling rewards, give out more stuff. It just felt like a healthier way for us to address the problem and serve the rewards to the player as they progress through, I guess.
Yeah. To me, it stood out as this idea of if you're playing the game, we want to reward that, and make your journey easier. So kind of coming at it from the opposite side rather than reducing, that upgrade sort of pyramid that you're going up. Pay more attention to how you progress. And that also allows us to pay attention to all levels, so not just focusing on the end game, but, people at every level upgrading should, feel like it's fun and have some friction reduced. So I think that leads nicely into my next question here, which has to do with a lot of the prep work that we've been doing to address that stuff before we get into level expansion. Can you talk a bit about what those efforts that we've been doing? Some of them have already been released this year. More are planned to be coming. But why were they so important to release before we started working on expansion itself, or at least, figure out that plan?
Yeah. So we've been sort of, improving rewards across the board, or introducing new opportunities for rewards with arcs and stuff, right? Incorporating more cost reduction into events and rewards. Again, I think the goal was, let's reward the players who are consistently engaging now and, allow them to build towards this expansion, right? And like you said, we're going to continue to do it after. we have a lot of great plans for that. And so I'm excited to see all that unfold.
Yeah, and another one that's coming, it has not been released yet. Actually, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. One I wanted to talk about before we move on to what has not been released yet is the Allegiance Shop, because that was a pretty exciting one that's been released this year, and I know that ties into all the work that we've been doing. In particular, I want to emphasize that this is a new source to be getting cost efficiency or cost reduction boosts from. And that's important because instant boosts coming from different sources can be stacked. So this is kind of a new level for you guys to be able to maximize your cost reduction as you're going through these upgrades. Can you speak a bit to the Allegiance Shop and how that factors into the rest of this work?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We've been very excited to release it and to see players sort of adopt it, right? And you're exactly right. Like it being a new source definitely allows for some of the cost reduction boosts to reach higher levels than they had previously. But what I love about the Allegiance Shop is just like it encourages and rewards social engagement, right? Working together, which I think is pretty important and impactful, right? And in terms of what it provides, I think is sometimes hard to appreciate in the moment. The impact of a cost reduction buff, but it has a profound impact on how like the velocity of progression for a player, right? In ways that I hope people appreciate.
Hard to see until you have all of those applied as well, but that is definitely one of those areas where we want to be more aggressive in terms of giving people cost reduction, kind of rewarding their gameplay. Moving on, let's talk about the new fourth line of enhancements that are going to be added, because that's another source where you can acquire efficiency stats. And it's also going to be available to all players at any level. You're going to have a new set of enhancements that you can use to help you with your progression in particular. Can you talk a bit about those, since this is a pretty significant addition, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely significant. So, like you said, like the idea is every building that has an enhancement line right now is going to get an additional line. That additional line will have 40 levels to it, have a similar cost structure that folks are used to with how much enhancements cost in terms of resources. But these are sort of special in that they're traditionally enhancements have only been a single property that slowly goes up level over level. These are going to have multiple properties in them, and they're going to kind of change over time based on the sort of needs of the player. So, for example, we like to think of there being sort of three stages to these. There's an early level stage where a line might offer some first creature or some basic resource cost reduction for buildings and research, right? And then it shifts into this mid tier where you still keep the bonuses from the early levels, but now you're earning bonuses for advanced resource cost reduction. So stuff like, let's say, keystones, slate, red gold, like that kind of stuff, right? All that kind of stuff. As well as some dragon focus stats. And then, the final stage of it is more of a meta combat focus. So there's a lot more verse seat of power, reinforcement rally cap stuff, some other things that I don't want to write checks for out loud right now, but they're very exciting potentially, right? So we're super excited about this feature, and we think it's a big counterbalance to what we're proposing here with the expansion to help folks grow, not just like the folks at the top and not the folks at the bottom, but everyone should see benefit from these lines, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited for those. And I know we also intend to continue monitoring and everything after all of these are released. If we need to make further additions, we can do that. We're committed to following this out after it launches, as well as preparing beforehand. Speaking of the things that are already in game, I saw some discussion from players who are asking about if we've actually seen any data so far of those changes that have been made, that players are actually leveling faster now or are reducing some of that friction in terms of progression.
Yes. Yeah. The answer is yeah. We've seen it like with charts like number of days spent at keeps. We've seen those significantly increase. Areas where we saw big gaps or time spent, those have started to shrink and stuff. Shout out to the crew here that put together the new player experience. I think those improvements and the cost reduction that was added there has had a huge impact on that. I think anyone who's started over in the game can probably feel that impact of how much quicker people are reaching certain house levels and keep levels. And so, yeah, it's really cool to see. And I highly encourage, if anyone hasn't started over to try out the new player experience, I encourage you to do so and see it for yourself, because it's fun. I've done it a few times now, and I enjoy it every time. It's a good time.
Yeah, we didn't mention that at all on the blog, but we have also been making a lot of improvements to our new player experience this year. Also, you recently re-rolled, and you were telling me how quickly you got up to a certain level, and I was so impressed with how quickly you did it.
It was fun too. It was like a race, right? Like it was the sort of the unlocking of Winterfell was, this like big race and stuff. I had a good time. It was a lot of fun.
So obviously, that's for the new players as well, but that kind of embodies that idea that we want to carry through all levels. It's just, a smoother ride that's fun all the way to the top. Before we shift on to another topic, I thought, since I have you here, maybe we could peek behind the curtain to talk a little bit about game development for a second. Because I believe when we released the first level expansion years ago, we actually built out the framework for this expansion at the same time, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So yeah, like these sort of features and stuff are huge undertakings, right? And like if you're implementing data for a set of levels, it's just as easy to extend that progression, as we call it, further to deeper levels, right? And we call that stub data. And having that stub data here has significantly increased the speed at which we can get that we got this expansion up and running, right? We could just kind of turn it on and see where we needed to update things and what we needed to do. But often stub data is quite literally like drag the range to the right to make the number keep going higher and call it a day, just so it's there. It's often not real numbers or values. So.
And I love that you've said that, because I do occasionally see those ancient numbers from years and years ago passed around amongst players. So I want to confirm for the record, those are not to be trusted, right? Those are going to be changing.
Very much not real. Yeah. And even if they were close, they sort of represent the old approach that we've talked about that we're sort of moving away from. So don't take those with a massive grain of salt, right? Yeah.
Yes. All right, moving on. Another topic that obviously everyone is very interested in, but we didn't touch too much in the blog because it's still actively under development, is Tier 12 troops. But I thought maybe you could give us some hints of some of the stuff that you're working on there.
Yeah, no, Tier 12 is happening. It's real. We're here. The hype train's here. It's focused around the Golden Company, which is pretty cool. I think the stat progression of these troops follows a sort of similar cadence that folks might be used to if you look at like troop tiers 8 versus tier 9 versus tier 10. We're kind of going to continue that trend. Right now they're in active development and testing. We're running like a bunch of simulations, seeing how they fit into sort of the combat meta and seats of power. How do we balance making them feel powerful but not meta breaking, right? Those are all things that are going on right now. So I don't really want to share stats because they're could be changed, but people can kind of surmise the direction that they're heading.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be a big focus of our next dev diary or communication that we have out. So if that's something that interests you, keep an eye on the blog. We'll definitely communicate more. Another topic that I've seen a lot of players talking about, and I thought maybe you could give us some insight into how leaderboards are going to work or change with the addition of level expansion.
Yeah, no, this has been like a hot topic of conversation lately around here, at least, right? We sort of have like these two main approaches to leaderboards under the hood in terms of, do we group players purely on a troop tier basis, or do we do some grouping of tiers either on the upper end, higher tiers together, or on the lower end, lower tiers together, troop tiers I'm referring to. And, a lot goes into how and why we choose those, or, and why they're utilized the way that they are. But I guess for the expansion, we're still actively having these conversations and making sure that we, sort of carefully walk through what are the pros and cons of either approach for players. And it's hard to say because it's a case by case, event type by event type basis, basically. So, but we're working on it.
Interested to see what comes out of that. The last one here that I have from player discussion was one, again, that we didn't really go into a lot of detail in the blog, but I know we've had a lot of interesting discussions about this. Will we be adding any higher level creatures or nodes to the combat map as a result of the higher player levels?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So for the expansion, we are not adding any new levels of creatures or nodes specifically right at this time. As many know, there's a lot of concerns over scarcity and the distribution of monsters, and we felt that we didn't have a good answer for adding more options to the pool. Right, we were going to exacerbate the problem, but that's not to say that there isn't things going on or investigations happening that could potentially address that problem. But we just made a call pretty early on that we were going to not wade into those waters with the expansion work at this time. Maybe later we will, but not right now.
Yeah, it's kind of outside the scope of expansion, but it's actually something that's very near and dear to Tabris and my heart. So we're very aware of it. We've been working through a few different things to try and alleviate that, and we stay tuned, I guess is all I'll say there. There might be more on that outside of the context of expansion. All right, I think that wraps up the questions that I had pulled from the community here. Is there anything else that you really wanted to communicate to players or have them understand about level expansion?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think, I hope that people feel that or know that we're taking this expansion very seriously, right? And sincerely understand folks who are a little apprehensive or nervous about it. You can rest easy knowing that we are just as scared of an expansion like this as you are. And we hope to, maybe we don't have to do this again, or maybe we have to wait a long time to do it again. I don't know. I don't want to say either way, but we believe that the approach we're taking is the best fit for the game. And hopefully some of the stuff that I've shared here has helped illustrate that.
Yeah, we don't want to have to do this again. If we can do it right, we want to do it. That's part of the reason why we took so long.
Exactly.
One last question before you go. I did see some speculation amongst players about what troop type you main.
Yes.
So I'd ask you to just set the record straight. Let us know your favorite troop type and why is it traps? Obviously, they are the best troop.
No, Bumble gets me. So I'm a trap main for what? No. In all seriousness, right? Like in all seriousness, I play all the types on different accounts. I think I have the most experience playing with infantry, or at least the longest run, whereas ranged, I've probably played the least. I think the last time, my last NPE restart, I played Cav, mainly because I'm impatient and it's just, I could share gear. It was a little bit easier to just, have my my PvP set and then some ceremonial Targaryen pieces and call it a day, right? Yeah. All this to say, I'm actually a siege main at heart. So there it is.
Great point. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Tabris. That does it for our interview. Thank you so much for joining us, McPivot.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.